Okay, well, greetings to everyone online, and let's hear a big round of applause for everybody being here on a Friday night. Confidence Psychology. We wish you could be here with us because the energy we're going to experience over the next 3 days is just profound. And when this many people that are like-minded begin to think about, what makes life worth living and all the elements related to that, it's a very, very unique experience. And I'll be back to you at the end of day 2 to ask you if that was your experience here. So about 10 years ago, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi had this idea that the way positive psychology should be taught and learned was getting people together once a year on a college campus without all of the expenses of a hotel and a conference center. And we talked about it. We talked about the latest research that's gone on in the field and the latest work in evidence-based practice. And so we tried that out, 10 years ago, and thought we could keep that going for a couple of years. But here we are, 10 years later. I've seen some of you before at these conferences, but let's start with, raise your hand if this is going to be your first WPPA experience. All right, welcome. And as you know, a lot more people will be joining us tomorrow. You're around like-minded people, so one of the things that you'll hear at the end of this is how many great new friends people have met and how many new collaborations might result from this. So let's see a show of hands for people who have been at WPPA before. Okay, look at that. If you're new, connect with one of these people. How many of you have been here 5 times or more? Wow, look at this. These are the committed. Has anybody been here every WPPA? Whoa, look at that. That's commitment. And we're going to give you something for that, Professor Bono, and we'll talk about that in a while. He's our next host, which we're going to hear about. Okay, well, as we were putting this program together, you usually get a list of speakers, and you approach them, you try to work on timing and so forth. But before we did that, we wanted to see if we could get one of the very top experts in the world on happiness. And being such a good friend and just down the street, we were blown away that we didn't need a list this year. She said, sure. And she loves positive psychology, and she loves this community. Sonja Lyubomirsky is graduated from Harvard and then did her PhD at Stanford University. I think her first academic job was Riverside. And she has been there now running a lab which is focused on things we can do, things we have control over. What are the controllables in a time like this, where there's a lot of challenge in our lives and in our society. And for 36 plus years, even before positive psychology started, she's been doing, the most rigorous science using experimental designs to answer the question, why do some people have happier lives than others? And what are some of the things we can do on a regular basis to experience more well-being and happiness? Her body of contribution, not just to positive psych, but to well-being science and topics related, is beyond profound. Her work is cited in the literature more than 92,000 times. Let's hear that. Those of you starting out, trying to build your Google Scholar, do not look at Sonja's. The social comparison is tough. She's introduced, some of the key theories, happiness pie, which shows how much control we have over this. Her work has shown, how happiness can be sustainable over time. But going across all of this rigorous research, she recently came to the conclusion, and I saw it in the email you sent me, that she now really has a good understanding on what is the couple of keys for us to have sustainable happiness. It's just a great honor and actually beyond belief that she's here with us and that she's going to teach us about her latest thinking on happiness. Let's hear it for Professor Sonja Lyubomirsky.
Yay. So today, of course, we'll talk about happiness. This is what I've been doing research on for 36 years. But we'll also talk about my new book called How to Feel Loved. Oops, there it is. There we go. Oops. Okay, I have to point. Sorry, it says it's an Apple, but it acts like a PC. All right, okay, got it. So I wrote this book with Harry Reese. I honestly think this is the best work of my career. I know that sounds boastful, but it's just like, something has to be the best work of your career, right? And it just suddenly, like, everything kind of came together. So we'll talk about that. So Harry is a professor of psychology at the University of Rochester. He's one of the preeminent relationship scientists. So we partnered together. We started working on our book proposal in 2018. So it's been a really long haul. My literary agent, I can say what his name is, but anyways, it's Richard, is his first name. Actually, Marty Seligman introduced me to Richard. He actually got the idea from positive psychology. I don't know if you guys know the story. Maybe I'll tell the story. His name is Richard Pine. He's a brilliant person. I trust him 100%. So I'll tell the story about the book proposal, and I'll tell you the connection to positive psychology that I heard from Marty. But it's actually written, I believe, when Marty won one of the APA Big Distinguished Awards. There's like a bio that's published. I believe this story is written there. Anyway, so Richard kept sending us back our book proposal for 5 years. He sent us back, and it was like there's a lot of revisions that we did, complete revisions, and every time he wouldn't tell us exactly which is right. He would just say, "That's not it," or like, "That's still not it," without actually ever telling us what it is. But I'm really glad he did, because suddenly everything kind of clicked and we saw the big picture, and then that's how the book was born. So little side note, this is how Marty told me. He was working on Learned Helplessness, as you guys all know, and he came to Richard, who published his books. He's his literary agent, and he said, "I want to write a new book about learned helplessness." And they talked about it in his office. I know what the office looks like. I just was there recently in New York. And Richard says, "Marty, why do you want to write about learned helplessness? Why don't you say it? Why don't you write about learned optimism. And Marty said, or Richard said, told me the story. He said, Marty just freaked out. He just started like walking around the room in circles. Because he got this, it was this aha moment. Why don't I study like the opposite of helplessness? And that's where positive psychology started. Anyway, that's Richard. So that's why I trust him. And I told him recently, I'm like, Richard, I really hated you during those 5 years. Like, I'm really glad you made me do it. And he just laughed. Anyway, so I'm going to give a medium talk today, kind of about the book and a little bit about happiness. But if your attention span, this is not that long of a talk. If your attention span is even shorter, I have a 5-minute TED Talk that is basically, this is the expanded version. So you can just do the 5-minute talk or maybe watch it later. And you can, by the way, if you can't, there's a QR code, but you can just Google Sonja TED and you'll find it. Let me start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I keep going to the screen. For those of you who don't know me very well, I'll start early. This is me at age 9. Now people don't believe me when I say this. This is the only photo I have of myself as a child. That's it. I had a really unhappy childhood and adolescence. Maybe someday I'll talk about it, maybe after my parents are gone. But I grew up to be a very happy person. Okay? I mean, I'm not happy all the time, but I'm a very happy person. So I've always been interested in why some people are happier than others and how people can become happier despite unlucky beginnings, maybe despite unhappy predispositions. Another little side note, my talk is actually fairly short, so I can add all these side notes. So I had an advisor in college at Harvard who was my honors thesis advisor. This brilliant guy. He was a student of Stanley Schachter's. Those of you who study social psychology know who that is. And I hadn't seen him for about 30 years. And then he came to visit me in Santa Monica, where I live. And so it was really interesting to talk to someone who knew you when you were like 20, and then didn't know you for 30 years. And so he told me something I didn't know. And he said, you were really interested in happiness as an undergrad. You talked about it a lot, studying happiness. So I did not remember that at all. So actually, I'll tell you the story that I do always tell about how I got interested in happiness. So I became an experimental social psychologist. By the way, my name, some of you know this, it means love and peace in Russian. Lyubov and mir. Tatiana knows this. So I always hated my name because no one can pronounce it or spell it. But it kind of turned out to be, appropriate for someone who studies happiness, and it's not easy to forget. I come to Stanford for my PhD. I become an experimental social psychologist, and I started working with Lee Ross. This is one of my favorite photos of him. Lee was a brilliant thinker, an experimentalist, and he was a world expert on conflict and negotiation. So kind of like the opposite to happiness. So when I met him, the very first day we spent together, this was back in 1989, September 1989. We took a walk around the Stanford campus, and we stumbled onto the Rodin Sculpture Garden, which one can do on only a few places in the world. And I still remember we were at the Sculpture Garden, and Lee is explaining to me how a great science experiment, like a great psychology experiment, is like a great sculpture. He said, just like a great work of art, a great experiment is something, the more you think about it, the more you look at it, the more you learn from it. You get different ideas from it, the different thoughts and ideas. And I still think that's true, of course. And so we're talking, and somebody asked, I'm pretty sure, I don't know who it was, but I think it was Lee, I'm pretty sure it was Lee. He asked during this walk on the first day of my graduate career, he asked, what do you think is the secret to happiness? And why are some people happier than others? So that's how it started, and I'm still having that conversation with Lee Ross in my head still today. And so we started this question catapulted me to a long career studying happiness. back then, I was very insecure about studying happiness. Right? Again, this is 1989. There's only one person in the world at this point who is studying happiness, and who is that? Ed Diener. And he didn't even call it happiness. He told me, and others I'm sure, that he didn't think he would get tenure at the University of Illinois if he uses the word happiness. So he created a new word. What is that? Subjective well-being, right? Which stuck. I use the word happiness, but I didn't have the luck. He paved the way. I have the luxury for not I like, but nothing wrong with subjective well-being. I use it too. But yeah, he paved the way for us all to use the word happiness. So that was sort of the beginning of that research. So for the first 10 years of my career, what we did is compared people who were happy to those who were unhappy, kind of to get into the heads or the minds or the bodies of a happy person. And so some of my earlier findings were things like, we found that happy people are less likely to regret their decisions than unhappy people. And happy people are less likely to compare themselves to others, right? Less likely to look up like Google Scholar, right? Ancient distance. Sort of what makes happy people tick. And so pretty frequently, the media started calling me, journalists started calling me, even back in grad school. They started calling me, and then they would ask me questions. Like they would ask me, Sonja, given your findings, what should we tell our readers about how our readers can become happier? And I always said, I don't know. Which they didn't love that answer. Or I would say, it depends. And why is that? It's because we don't know. It's a correlation, right? Just because happier people are more grateful doesn't mean that if you prompt an unhappy person to be more grateful, they get happier. Well, now we know actually they do, but we didn't know that then. It was just a correlation. Furthermore, I was kind of an elitist back then. Maybe I still am. And I thought that was a very applied science question they were asking me. And I consider myself something better than that. That I was considering myself a basic scientist. Like as though basic science is better than applied science. And of course that's completely ridiculous, and in fact they can't really be disentangled. That they are just entwined completely, basic and applied science. But I also realized that the question of how people can become happier is actually a really interesting basic science question, right? How happiness can shift over time, up and down, is actually a really interesting scientific question. So that got me on this new journey of studying how people can become happier. Okay, so, I can't believe I missed this. Well, actually, no, this is the next slide. So then I became a happiness scientist. And I've been doing this research for 36 and a half years. You can count back to fall of 1989. And so for my entire career, I've been at UC Riverside. So my first job, maybe my last job. It's a really wonderful department. That's our building there, very, very close to here. Amazing. I've had amazing students, PhD students over the years, and colleagues. These are some of the ones that I cite today in my talk. I'm very grateful to my students and colleagues, especially my PhD students. I really want to shout out to them because they really not just contributed, but spearheaded like much of the research I'm talking about today. Research that I put my name on, but they really spearheaded. And you'll see their photos. I've tried to include some of their photos on the studies that I mentioned. So all these years I've been obsessed with learning the secrets to being a happy person, really trying to answer this question. Here, the How Happiness and the Myths of Happiness are my first two books that were all about happiness. Some of you know them. Trying to answer the question, can anyone become happier if they just simply put their minds to it? And if yes, how? And how do we even study something like this? Well, you guys know better than others. I give talks to all kinds of audiences that are like, I don't understand how one can study happiness. In 1998, think back, 1998, Bill Clinton is in the White House. This is before, really positive psychology is born around 98, 99. My lab pioneered what we call happiness interventions. So happiness interventions are basically clinical trials. They are actually clinical trials, randomized controlled trials, in which we, instead of testing a medication or a vaccine, we're testing hypotheses about different happiness practices. So we might randomly assign some people to do acts of kindness for others. Others we might randomly assign to do acts of kindness for themselves or for the world. And we've done studies like that. And we also always have a control condition. We have something, people do something neutral, and then we follow them across time, and we see if they report feeling happier, do they report greater sense of connection or improved health, etc. I thought I would show you. This is not really what it looks like, right? This is a happiness intervention. It's not really what it looks like. So over the years, we've done dozens of these experiments, testing, whether practices like writing gratitude letters, doing acts of kindness, counting your blessings, simply talking with a stranger or acting extroverted, whether those practices make people happier. And we know they do under the right conditions. I'm now involved also in the happiness mega study, that Liz Dunn and others are running, where we're trying to replicate these, with thousands and thousands of subjects across many cultures. So that's going to be amazing when that is completed. As I said, over the years we've done dozens of these studies. I want to put a plug in. One of my former grad students, I couldn't do the enter. For some reason, it seems more comfortable for me. So Kristen Leyes is one of my former grad students, who's now a tenured professor at Cal State East Bay. So she and I wrote a paper, and I just want to put a plug for this paper. It's a chapter, and I am really probably more proud of this paper than any other, that we wrote for the Handbook of Social Psychology. And those of you who know, Handbook of Social Psychology is released every 10 to 15 years and has chapters that summarize the entire field of social psychology. And this time, this is from 25, is the very first time there's a chapter on well-being. And we wrote the chapter. It took us 2 years and a lot of all-nighters. And it's 150 pages, or I should say, in Word, it's 150 pages with 100 pages of references. Wow. So it's very comprehensive. And actually, those references are probably the most important thing about that chapter, right? So if you just want one, comprehensive guide to the whole field of research on well-being, and it's also free, so it's digital. You can download it in 10 seconds, which is really cool. And also we include kind of a big picture, a model, kind of like a grand theory of happiness research in that as well. So, okay, that's a plug for our paper. Okay, back to interventions. So over the last 25 years, we've done dozens of interventions, but my lab is particularly focused really on 3 types of interventions, or randomized controlled trials. We've done interventions testing gratitude, doing acts of kindness, and also asking people just to simply act more social. So just for a few minutes, I'm going to review, I just want to tell you, just to say a few words, kind of super quick, about some examples of the interventions we've done. Some of them you already know about, some of them you may not know about. So for example, we have done lots of studies, and people in this room have as well, where we ask people to write gratitude letters or count their blessings. So we find, for example, that people who are asked to write gratitude letters to their parent or their best friend or their mentor or their coach, they feel happier, more connected. One of my favorite findings is we asked more than 1,000 high school students, these were 9th and 10th graders, from 3 high schools in Southern California. Some of you may know of these high schools. One of them was an elite independent school in LA. One is a big public high school in one of the beach cities. One of them is a Catholic, working class Catholic school in the Valley. And also one of them was a very diverse charter school in New York State, so the one that's not in California. So these 9th and 10th graders wrote letters, gratitude letters every week for 4 weeks to their mentors, teachers, or parents. And we hypothesized that it would make them, it would inspire them to be a better person, right? This idea that when you're truly grateful for people who've helped you, that when you realize your success and happiness is not just about you, but about other people who've helped you, that you want to pay them back, you want to prove yourself worthy, you want to make your benefactors proud. And so, again, one of my favorite findings is we found that the students who wrote gratitude letters relative to a control group of students who were asked to organize their time by writing about their daily activities. So it was a neutral but kind of positive sounding activity. Anyway, the students who wrote gratitude letters ate healthier over the 4-month period. That means more fruits fruits and less junk food, and less fast food. This is the high school graduate study. There it is. weirdly that I have the methods after I have the result. Yeah, so they were gratitude letters or about their activities for 4 weeks. I'm just showing that what the graph looks like. So baseline to post-test is 4 weeks, right? It's a 4-week intervention, and then we have a 3 months follow-up. So it's a 4-month period over the course of these students' lives. You can see the control group is actually eating less healthfully over time, which is not surprising. You know, they're getting stressed out, they have more work, etc. Okay, and there's a lot more from that data set. I have, of course, all the references for everything I talk about today. We've also done tons of studies moving to acts of kindness interventions. We've done tons of studies where we ask people to do acts of kindness, usually do 3 acts of kindness a week for a period of a month. So like every Monday, do 3 acts of kindness you wouldn't necessarily do. Sometimes we've done studies that are just 2 weeks long. So we found, for example, that people who do acts of kindness for others, as opposed to for themselves. By the way, doing acts of kindness for yourself is actually a great comparison condition, because it also makes you feel good. Maybe you might do something self-indulgent. It could be self-care. So like you might take a nap or have a piece of chocolate or get a massage. Like just do something nice for yourself. What we find is doing something nice for yourself makes you feel good temporarily, but doesn't necessarily carry over to the next day, the next week. So we find that doing acts of kindness for others fosters a sense of competence, makes you feel more competent, makes sense, because acts of kindness hopefully are things that help others actually or effectively. And also, people report having greater meaning in life when they're doing acts of kindness that we're prompting. We've also this is the actual design of that study where people were asked either to do kind acts for others, for the self, or we also compared people who did social acts or open-minded acts. Open-minded is like be open to culture or music. And so it's really the kind acts for others that had the most benefits. We've also found in a number of studies now, teaming up with my old grad school buddy, Steve Cole, who's an immunologist. He created a field called social genomics. We find that people who are prompted to do acts of kindness for others versus those who are prompted to do acts of kindness for themselves, they show changes in their RNA gene expression associated with a healthier immune profile. So what we find is that they show reductions or downregulation of pro-inflammatory gene expression. So here's the design. We have 4 groups, either do acts of kindness for yourself or others, for the world, or we have a control group. In addition to collecting measures of happiness and connection, we also collect people's blood. And then we send the blood over to Steve Cole's lab, because I'm not a biologist. And again, we find that people who do acts of kindness for others show changes in immune gene expression. So when you look at these four bars, only that bar that says other, those are people who did acts of kindness for others, show that they show downregulation of pro-inflammatory genes. So think more inflammation is bad, so you want less pro-inflammatory gene expression. We did another, this is with Katie Nelson Coffey, whose husband went here, right? John Coffey. And they're both now professors at Arizona State. We also replicated this study and found that also, again, people who do acts of kindness for others and actually do them, they show downregulation of pro-inflammatory genes and upregulation of antiviral genes. So that's pretty cool, right? You want greater antiviral activity, less pro-inflammatory activity. And then my student who just graduated last year, Ramona Martinez, she's now a professor at Cal State Long Beach, not far from here. She did a similar study where she simply asked people to act more extroverted or more social and found also similar effects. Less pro-inflammatory gene expression, more antiviral. So maybe it's just acting social that matters, not necessarily acting kind. So that's something to think about, talk about. So what do we mean by acting extrovert, acting social? We developed a very powerful happiness intervention where we just simply asked people, act more extroverted for a week. Now, we didn't actually use the word extroverted, right? Because it has positive connotations in Western culture. So we used the words like sociable, spontaneous, energetic, sociable. And then for 1 week, people were asked to be spontaneous, energetic, sociable. And then for another week, we asked them to act more introverted, like thoughtful, deliberate. And we found huge effects and positive benefits of acting extroverted for both introverts and extroverts. So that was a big surprise. And actually, we've done a review of the literature, and except one study, with one exception, the introverts benefit just as much as the extroverts, which is, again, we can talk about that, why, that's really interesting. So this is that state. Act extroverted for 1 week, and the words we use are talkative, assertive, spontaneous versus a deliberate, quiet, reserved. We actually had judges code these words to make sure they were sort of equally positive, because we didn't want that kind of social desirability difference to stand out. And this is the main finding. Well, this is one of the main findings we had. Basically, on almost every variable we looked, during the extroversion week, people got happier. And then on some of the variables, like positive affect, the introversion week, people actually felt less positive affect. Again, it was a huge surprise. I mean, I'm a big fan of introversion. I read Susan Cain's book. I actually thought anyone here read that book? It's great. And if you have introverted students or introverted kids, like I do, it's really useful. So let's see. Next, so that's our study. So we did many of these interventions. By the way, we're still doing them. You can ask me later what we're focusing on right now in terms of our energies. I will mention some of our current intervention work. So these interventions really made my career. They made my my life really. And yet after all of these years, I realized that I wasn't really listening to what the data were trying to tell me. And then it finally all clicked, right? And I think it was like maybe 5 years ago, it kind of all clicked. And I realized that almost all of the interventions that work to make us happier, the reason they work precisely because they make us feel more connected to and loved by others. So when I write a gratitude letter to my mom, it makes me feel more loved by her. When I do an act of kindness for my best friend or for a colleague, it makes me feel closer to them, right? So you can argue, maybe if you go running outside or meditate, that it's not about other people or connection, although even that often is. But most of the interventions, almost all of them, again, the reason they work is they make us feel more connected and more loved. So it sort of hit me that maybe, basically what I learned is that to become a better happiness scientist, I had to become a love scientist. My 12-year-old made that slide for me. I really like it. But actually what I did, I ended up not becoming a love scientist really, but partnering with a love scientist, Harry Rees, to write this book. So because it turns out the key to happiness is feeling connected and loved. So this is my epiphany after 36 years. And I know it sounds like a cliche, right? It sounds like, oh really, wow, it took you 36 years to get to this point. But I think that almost all powerful ideas, once you distill them into a cliche, once you distill them to a few words, they sound like trite and simple, right? Like a cliche. So I'm actually thinking, people who've gone on like psychedelic journeys, and they come back, and they're like, I have the answer to everything, right? And you're like, what is the answer? And they're like, it's love, right? Or we are one. And you know what? It's just true. I think they're right, and yet it sounds so hokey and so like simplistic. Again, because when you distill something, it just sounds simplistic. So the real challenge and opportunity is how do we put this into practice? So then, how do we connect? Well, actually, I guess before we talk about that, this is really what my book is about. And yet some people say, but I have connections, I have friends, I have people who love me, but I'm still not happy. So that brings me to sort of another point, which is that many of us are loved, but we don't feel loved. So Harry and I, and actually Saida is actually maybe the only person, we cite her work, who's actually asked people how much do they feel loved, do they feel loved? And so we did a kind of a parallel survey for our book, where we just asked people how much do they feel loved in various relationships in their lives, and we found that 70% say there's at least one significant relationship in their life that they don't feel as loved as they would like to be. 70%. I actually think that's an understatement. I bet it's higher than that. And 40% said, I wish I were more loved felt more loved by my partner, my romantic partner. Okay, so I think it's definitely a big issue. And the research suggests, I would say, that if you don't feel loved, you're not going to be truly happy. So then, how do we feel loved, and how do we connect? Good question, right? I'll just keep that first here. Well, you can connect by touch, right? You can connect through eye contact. You can connect through dance, right? But really, like, how do we usually connect with other people? And certainly in Western culture, maybe in most cultures, we connect by talking. Yet here's the problem with our social worlds today. Even when we're talking to each other, we all have walls around each other. And by the way, once you see it everywhere. We have walls around each other. We build those walls to protect ourselves. Like, they're healthy, they're good for us, and yet they also keep us from letting people in, right? They keep us from becoming truly known. And so this is literally my number one happiness tip, kind of the one thing I wish everyone knew, which is that if you want to feel more loved, you will feel more loved by becoming more known, by taking down the walls between us, between each other, my walls and your walls. And the secret to how to do this, I could say, is sort of simple and profound at the same time, both simple and profound. If you could do one thing today to be happier, let it be this: show up differently, or approach your next conversation differently than how you've done it before, perhaps starting tonight. Okay, so it's all about conversations. And we argue that a relationship is just a series of conversations. And by the way, you're not always literally talking with words, it's a series of conversations. So it's actually very empowering, because when people don't feel loved, they think, oh, I need to change myself, I need to change the other person somehow. And we say, no, you just need to change the conversation. So how do you do that? How do you change conversations? How do you become more known? Well, first, by sharing from the heart, sort of by embracing what we call in our book a sharing mindset. And the idea is that you take down your walls by sharing something real about yourself. Not just the positive things, not just your highlight reel, right? Something true about yourself that's true about you deep inside. So, we say whether it's with your best friend or your colleague or your partner or your mom or your kids, be brave enough to let others see the real you. And by the way, I don't like to use the word real, because I don't believe there's such a thing as like a real self or true self versus not true self, because all of ourselves are part of us, right? Like, all those layers are part of us. If I'm trying to make an impression, that's still part of me, right? That's I want to make an impression. But anyway, there are these layers, so right, getting down to the layers. And so, in other words, so don't do what most of us do, which is that we try to impress. Instead of showing parts of ourselves, we tend to show off. This is very human. We try to impress. So here I am standing in front of you all today, right now, and I want you to think that I'm smart, and that I'm knowledgeable, and I'm expert, and I'm interesting, and I'm a good person, right? And I might even I might even succeed at impressing you of these things. I might even succeed at getting you to admire me, but it's not going to forge a connection, right? And that happens when you meet someone for the first time, whether it's a business person in a business meeting or a first date, right? We're just sort of trying to impress each other. And again, that's fine, that's normal, it's human, but it's not going to really make anyone feel loved or really feel connected. And so the idea is you want to really show more of yourself by sort of being vulnerable. And so how do you do that? You start small, you start slowly. Pacing is really important. You need to read the room. You don't just share your deepest secret or trauma, right? And if you go deep too fast, too soon, everyone's walls will go right back up again, right? So, because again, the idea is to sort of lower the walls. By the way, you don't take down the walls completely, then you'll probably lose your whole sense of self, right? Because you need them, you can lower them, or you can, another way to think about it is you expand them to include others. So So in the beginning, you might just try saying something honest, right? Like if someone asks you, how are you? Instead of saying fine, which we do 99% of the time, you might say, oh, I had a rough morning, or, I don't know, I had this negative thought. It doesn't even have to be negative, what you say. It could just be something that represents how you feel. So it's like what you think you are on the inside, and represent something that matters to you. So it could be like just sharing a true opinion you have. Maybe you really like that music that no one else likes, or you hate that TV show that everyone else loves. Studies show that people will like you more that when the conversation is deeper as opposed to shallower, right? And people will feel closer to you when the conversation is deeper as opposed to shallower. So I like to say goodbye to small talk. I don't really mean that because small talk does have a role to play. It is a social lubricant. Nick Epley, who is a professor at the University of Chicago Booth, has a great new book out called A Little More Social. I really recommend it. And it's about just being a little more social. Well, as like I have studies about, he definitely talks about our extroversion studies in that book. Just being a little more social, and that includes small talk. Even like with the barista, with the Uber driver, that it makes us feel more human. Like we're all on the same boat. We're all part of the same planet, right? Now it's your turn to listen, and the other person is speaking, and they're telling their story. Now, how do you help them, the other person, your conversation partner, who could be your partner, it could be your mom, it could be your friend, your colleague. They're talking, and you are listening to them. And so basically, to make them feel more loved, and to help lower their walls, you want to listen to them in order to learn, not to respond. So usually we listen to respond instead of listening to learn. So the idea is you want to quiet your voice so theirs could be heard. The problem is we have all this inner chatter in our heads, and it's very distracting. And the other person can sense it. There's some surveys that have found that at least 25% of the time when we're trying to listen, our mind is wandering. Yeah. And I bet it's more than 25%, but it's at least 25%. So studies show that most of us think, this is great, most of us think we're good listeners, but we think other people are bad listeners. No, it's not true. Most of us are bad listeners, including me. It's really hard to listen well because, again, as we're listening, we're mentally rehearsing what we're trying to say, what we want to say next. So it's really hard. So again, next time, instead of mentally rehearsing what you're trying to say next, listen like there's going to be a quiz on it. And actually, that's what listening workshops do. Harry and I actually went to a listening workshop in Tel Aviv. So the two biggest listening researchers in the world are in Israel, Guy Itzchakov and Avi Kluger. And so we went to their workshop, and we actually had to do this. We had to split up in pairs, and each person sort of tells a story, about that one was about a career transition. And then you had to repeat the story, and it's amazing. First of all, I listened so well. I was just I'm very good. I'm an A student. I know how to and yet still I got a lot of things wrong. She's like, no, I never said that. Anyway, so listen like it's going to be you could be quizzed on it tomorrow. And furthermore, during your next conversation, ask questions. Ask at least one more question that you normally ask. Questions not just that show that you're really, really listening and that you care. So what was inspiring about that? What was the worst thing about it? What was the best thing about it? Again, get back to Nick Epley, who's a friend of mine. He's done this beautiful line of research that shows that people think that asking deep questions of others is going to be awkward or uncomfortable, that other people will think that we're prying or nosy. And I've had experiences like that with my friends and my family. They're like, oh, I can't ask that. They'll think I'm prying. I'm like, well, actually, on average, everyone thinks that. But on average, we crave to be asked, right? We crave to be seen and heard, right? When was the last time someone asked you a deep question about your life? Probably not that, probably, yeah, we don't because it's it's pluralistic ignorance, right? We all think that no one wants to ask, but actually we want to ask, but we think there's a barrier there. So, and furthermore, say the 3 words that everyone wants to hear. What are those 3 words? They're not, there's not a right or wrong question. I would say they're not I love you, they're not, you've lost weight, and they're not, you were right. That's my favorite. It's, tell me more. Tell me more. But it has to be really genuine and authentic and enthusiastic. Like, I really want to hear tomorrow. You know, it's not that often that people are really care. And the other thing is, try not to make suggestions. When you're listening, instead of making a suggestion or trying to fix the problem, you just make them feel heard, right? So you're like, oh, that must have been really hard. And I'm not so good about that. I actually have a little side rant that I'm not going to go into. I actually do think the pendulum has swung way too far on how like we should always make people feel heard and validated, and sometimes they need advice, right? They need to be told what to do, right? Right? You know that video, like the nail in the head? If you don't just like Google it, and you just want to, yeah, I mean, I get it. Maybe you first make them feel heard. I'm so sorry, it must be so painful to have a nail in your head. And then you're like, take the friggin' nail out of your head, right? So, anyway, that's a little side rant. But anyway, the idea is, yeah, try to not make suggestions, at least at the beginning. Like, make them feel heard. But these kinds of like saying like, oh, that must be hard, or asking deep questions, it really signals that you're right there with them, right? And people feel heard. It's really a gift. When it's authentic, again, when you say, tell me more, and you're really interested, it's really beautiful. It's a gift. Okay, we've recently gotten, maybe not so recently, like a year and a half ago, we got a big grant from the Tiny Blue Dot Foundation to study the effects of what's called high quality listening, which is listening to learn, both the psychological and the genomic, remember the RNA gene expression effects on the listener. Most research is on the benefits of listening for the speaker, right? It makes sense, right? If I'm speaking, you're listening, I feel great, right? But also there's benefits on the listener. So if you're a good listener, you'll also benefit. So there is some research on that already. We're adding to the research by looking at various benefits for listening. And we're looking at like we're looking at strangers, we're looking at friends, we're looking at couples. And also a little side note here. So Harry and I proposed actually 5 mindsets to embrace if you want to feel more love. We just went over the sharing mindset and the listening to learn mindset. I'm going to talk about a third one. There's 2 more that you can read the book for. And so it's all on the website. But we also created a quiz. It's only 5 questions. It's very short, like 5 minutes or less, that will tell you which mindset you are best at. What is your strength? And which you need to improve in a particular relationship in your life. The idea is you think of a relationship, it could be with your partner, your daughter, your best friend, and then you take this quiz. And actually people have, we've gotten some really good feedback about this quiz. And actually I will tell you, 2 early readers of the book read the book. There wasn't a quiz at that time. They read the book and they told us that it led them to break up with their girlfriends. So that was not our intention, but and I'm assuming, by the way, they went to therapy and all that, but they said we thought this was kind of prescriptive, like you want to feel loved, you want to share and listen, but they used the book as like a diagnostic, kind of to hold a mirror to their relationship, and they're like, my girlfriend is no longer curious about my work, or my girlfriend doesn't share, I don't either, neither of us are listening. So that's interesting to kind of use it as a diagnostic. So I created the quiz. Okay, so now I want to talk about a third mindset that we call radical curiosity, to be curious. Now, I might have alluded to this already. I'm kind of going a little bit backwards. If you want to feel more loved, the first step is actually to make the other person feel more loved. You go first. So yes, it's actually quite empowering. That's happened to me. I had a relationship where, with a family member, I wasn't feeling really loved by them, and I was like, oh, what should I do? I need to do this. And then I realized, no, I need to make them feel more loved. And so I started being curious. So the first step was really genuine, authentic curiosity. We call it radical curiosity about the other person. Find something, maybe it's a passion of theirs, something they really care about. It's really hard to be curious, but that's how you learn to take down, you help them to take down their walls, right? By really approaching them with wonder and asking lots of questions. Remember a time when someone was so curious about you and what you had to say, right? They were just they just couldn't wait for you to finish your story, right? They were like leaning in, and their eyes were bright, and they're just like, right, they were just so excited to talk to you, right? It doesn't happen that often, and when it happens, it's a gift, right? It's magical. By the way, charismatic people are really good at it, which is partly why we flock. We want to talk to people who are charismatic because they're so curious about you, right? They want to know everything. So approach others with wonder, but here's one of the problems, that we often stop being curious about the people that we're closest to, the people we've known for the longest, because we think we know everything about them. And so we stop asking them questions, and yet there's always more to learn, right? Because think about it, every minute, so let's say you've been with your partner for 20 years, but every minute of every day, they're having new experiences, new feelings, new self-doubts, new dreams, new hopes, new fears, right? Every day. So there's always something new to learn. So the idea is to really approach other people with wonder, especially those that we've known the longest. Ask yourself, what don't I know about this person? Ask yourself, what more can I learn? So again, sort of the radical curiosity mindset is about approaching other people with wonder. We've actually started to study curiosity. Oh, well, before I get to that, people sometimes will ask me like, well, what questions should I ask? And so you probably know there's lots of question decks out there. You can buy a question deck. And I have friends who literally will bring these decks on dates. And they say it works great. You know, really, it seems hokey or kind of awkward. My favorite, by the way, I don't make any money from them. I just think they're so good. It's called The And, like the word the and the word and, a very strange type of title. That's my favorite deck. But from that and others, I've compiled a few questions you can ask tonight, here at the reception, or to your child, your parent. That's the other thing, you guys, if you don't do anything else after this talk, ask if your parents are still alive, ask them, like call them, text them, write to them, and ask them questions. We often don't ask our parents questions, right? How are you really feeling? What is going on? Tell me about this or that. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me, right? Like we take them for granted. They are the ones who ask us about questions. Okay, what's something you secretly wish people knew about you? Actually, that could be a question for one of your parents. In what ways can I be a better friend to you? Isn't that a good one? It's kind of vulnerable. I'm kind of afraid to ask it sometimes. What is the best mistake you've ever made? I think that's a good one. Who in your family surprised you the most this year? See that one? It's not too deep, right? You can start with that one. What do you see in me that I don't see myself? And that, by the way, that often is the case. We all know that. Like those of us who are mentors, we have younger colleagues and we have students, and we look at them and we think, they're going to be a star. And you know what? They don't see it. I actually just yesterday, one of my very young colleagues, she's in her second year as a professor. I think she's still in her 20s. She gave this presentation, and I said to her afterwards, you're going to be a chair. You're going to be the chair of our department someday. And she was like, what? I meant it as a compliment. You know what I mean? Like, she has what it takes. And she doesn't see it. I don't know. She probably doesn't see it. Anyway, what are the subjects you avoid talking about and why? Okay, now I'm going to share the question that is the hardest, most vulnerable question to ask, especially if you're like in a romantic relationship or very, very close relationship. Okay, here it goes. Ask me something you're afraid to ask me. Right? So that's like next level. I don't recommend starting with that one. Okay. So my students and I are also studying curiosity. One of my current students, her name is Madison Montemayor Dominguez, did a study actually for her second year project. We have kind of a second, like a master's thesis, where she asked people over the course of 1 week, to act curious. And we had examples, but kind of like every day act curious, and the control group was asked just to engage in routine behaviors, and then we asked them to what they did over the course of the week, and basically we found that people who just simply acted curious showed increases in positive affect, autonomy, and self-worth. We're particularly interested, by the way, in social curiosity, which is curiosity about another person. And so there's also curiosity about topics versus people, right? Sometimes you love basketball and you'll talk about basketball with anyone. It doesn't really matter who the person is as long as they want to talk to you about it. And sometimes we're just interested in the person. Like when you're first falling in love, you want to know everything about them, including topics that you may not be interested in. By the way, a study just came out like last month, I think, that found that even boring conversations about boring topics go better. We enjoy them more than we think. So basically, lots of research showing that conversations are the key to, well, I would say connection. Feeling loved is the key to happiness. How do you feel loved? Through conversation. How do you have better conversations? With listening, curiosity, sharing. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, so you probably all had this experience where you meet someone, they talk at you for an hour, they tell you their whole life story, and they walk away knowing nothing about you, right? That happens. So that's not what I'm talking about. If you're only sharing, it's a monologue. If you're only listening and being curious, then it's an interview, or worse, an interrogation, right? So you really need both, all of those things, right? All of these things hold hands, right? You need to listen and be curious and share. And that's when the magic happens, right? When you do them all together. The other mindsets, by the way, is basically listening with warmth and with acceptance. So it's really that simple. By sharing, I'm pretty much done, I guess. By sharing a little more, that's it. And sharing a little more and listening deeper with curiosity, warmth, and acceptance, we all can take down the walls, or not take them down completely, lower the walls with each other. We all can know one another better, right? Because the key to feeling loved is really being known and knowing the other person, and we'll feel more loved, and we'll make other people in our lives feel more loved too. Thank you, that's it. Now we'll start with in-person questions. Yay! And I'm gonna be the moderator. And since this is your 10th WP, I think he gets the first question. What's your name, sir? What's your name?
Greg.
Greg?
Yes.
Greg. Yeah.
Healthy eating?
Healthy eating?
Yeah. Is that your metric? What?
Oh, the metric was self-report, right? So we asked people to keep a diary, kind of eating, to tell us what they're eating. And we didn't actually, we didn't have objective measures. Still pretty cool. Yeah. So gratitude, let people be healthier. That was actually one of our hypotheses. We have a grant on this, that if you're truly grateful, you want to be a better person. Because it's like, you just want to be better for your kids, for your family, for your friends. And you become, also we have a line of research on humility too. Because gratitude, we have a study that shows on days you're grateful, you're more humble, and days you're more humble, you're more grateful. Does that make sense? Because when you're truly grateful, you realize it's not just about me, it's all these other people in your life. And actually, one more little side story. There's a book called Success and Luck by Robert Frank. Great book. And he's an economist at Cornell, I think. And he has this story. He said he was sitting in a big faculty meeting, all economists, and maybe other departments. And I think they were waiting around for the meeting to start. And so he said, a lot of people here are academics, right? He said, raise your hand if you're mentored or self-made, right? So raise your hand if you're self-made, and raise your hand if you're mentored. All but one person said they are self-made. Isn't that incredible? These are academics, all of our lives are mentored, right? Starting with when we're undergrads, when we're grad students, all those letters of recommendation, it's amazing, but this is this American thing, we think that we're all self-made. But no, but I think gratitude is the antidote, because when you're truly grateful, you realize of course you're not self-made. Yes, you work hard, yes. But so many people had a role to play in your success and your happiness. Thank you. Yes. What's your name?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What's your name?
Andrea.
Andrea?
Yeah, great meeting you.
Thank you.
So I'm originally from Chile, but I've been here since I was 11. And when it comes to your research on, I guess my question is what kind of cultural impact does it have in the research that you make? Because I was recently in Spain, and since I've been here since I was 11. I have more of the American culture. I meet with my friend in Spain, and she says, "Tell me everything about it. I want to know everything about you." And I was like, "Whoa, that's a little too much."
Totally, great question.
Argentinians complain all the time,
Yeah.
right? You ask them, I'm sorry.
She's like,
I'm married to an Argentinian.
great question.
And he does it.
Lots of cultural differences. Actually, if you're interested, I have a website that's just my name, sonjalyubomirsky.com, that has all my papers, like literally pretty much all my papers. And I have a whole bunch of papers on culture, including some chapters that summarize like cultural differences in the pursuit of happiness and interventions. And the book has also a chapter where we talk about individual differences in personality, culture, gender, because those things, right, like in some cultures, people are like listen more and talk less. I think in a lot of Asian cultures. I don't want to make generalizations, but there's some research on this. And so I feel like the processes I'm talking about are pretty universal. I don't like to use the word universal because it's such a strong word, but they're pretty universal. Like humans want to feel connected, but just how it looks like is going to be a little different, right? So in some cultures it might take a lot longer to get to the point where you share more, and for some it's going to be right away, right? Some involve a lot of touch, and some really don't touch at all, right? And listening, and then we talk about individual differences. What if you're on the spectrum and you're having trouble picking up cues when you're having a conversation, right? That's going to impact how you listen and how you share. And then we have tons of studies on cultural differences in interventions, right? So, like just as one example, we found that in Korea, people who wrote gratitude letters did not benefit. Actually, we had sort of a non-significant decline in happiness, and so there's various ideas for why that is, but like gratitude could really look very different in different cultures. So yeah, I'm very sensitive. I'm not a cultural psychologist, but I'm sort of sensitive to all these like cultural, group, and individual differences that are out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, I think you're next, and then you. Yeah, what's your name?
June?
June?
Yes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the notion that happiness is a choice, and how does that notion relate to your research and to this book?
Yeah, no, absolutely, completely. And by the way, when you want to call on anyone there too, we can do that. Let me know when. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of happiness is under our control. Just like I said with this, people don't feel loved. I'll start with that, and I'll go to happiness. When people don't feel loved, which is the key to happiness, they think like, oh, I need to like somehow convince the other person to love me more, or I need to somehow make myself more lovable. But we say, no, it's actually, you just need to change the conversation. So how you show up in conversations is pretty empowering. Like, that's a choice. It's not as easy for everyone, but we can all try, tonight or tomorrow, next month, to listen more, to share more. So yeah, absolutely, there's a controllable component to it, and with happiness as well. Now, but we do have to acknowledge that there's a genetic component to happiness, right? We know there's strong genetic influences on every human trait, including happiness. Doesn't mean you're fated to be a certain level or range, but it just means it'll be harder, right, to move higher or lower out of that range. I call it like a set range. So there are constraints. But absolutely, and I know, and I realize it's such an individualistic culture thing to say. Like, of course, it's a choice, because for some people it's really hard, right? So if you live in poverty, if you live in a war zone, if you're in an abusive relationship, it's extremely hard to be happy. And if you can't get out of that, and I know people who've just not been able to get out of those situations, then it's not a choice. So, with that caveat, thank you. What's your name?
So I've been married for 38 years. I kind of know how to stay together.
Yeah.
Is there any data on whether married people or unmarried people are happier?
Yes. So the short answer is married people are happier, but it's a correlation, right? So there's lots of issues with that finding. So one is happier people are more likely to find a marriage partner. So some of that effect is actually backward, right? So happier people are more likely to get married, right? And then the other problem with the marriage data is that the people who are married, it's like you do an experiment, and the people who actually don't do well in the experiment drop out, and you only measure the ones who've stayed in. That's what happens with the marriage data. the ones who get divorced or whatever separated, they're not included. So it's only the ones who've actually like successfully stayed married that are in the sample. So, but having said that, we know that there's lots of benefits of strong committed relationships. Yeah.
Yes, second. I've found it's the 3 C's: commitment, communication, compromise.
That's a good one. Like, you were right. No, just kidding. Just say you were right. Yeah, just kidding. Sorry. Let me go to that side of the room for a bit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What's your name?
I'm Kayvon Gayola.
Kayvon.
I'm a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
And I practice integrating psychology and the whole spectrum of faith. So every morning since I was 14, I would say this long obligated prayer from the Baha'i faith. At the beginning of it, this is what I say: make my prayer a fire that will burn away the veils that have shut me out from thy beauty.
Oh.
So I'm not doing gratitude, I'm actually curious. I'm hopeful, and I trust that eventually I will see his beauty every day, in everything I look at. So that's what keeps me going. And the thought of being grateful is kind of bring me down, because
Well, thank you for bringing that up. So first of all, people used to think that gratitude is this like passive emotion, that you're sort of grateful and you sit back and you're like satisfied, you don't do anything. Actually, gratitude is an active emotion. When you're grateful, you're inspired to like make the world a better place, to be a better person. So that's one suggestion I would say is maybe reframe gratitude. But also, you've just mentioned, what was it, curiosity and openness and optimism, hope, or faith. Like, it's like, it sounds like you're optimistic. And those are all like really beautiful approaches to living a good life. So you already are doing it. So, yeah.
And then in the middle of it, I said, do not look upon my hopes and my doings, nay, rather look upon thy will that has encompassed the heavens and the earth. And all of a sudden I feel at one with the whole unknown which is out there. So that's another aspect.
Well, I do want to say people who are religious or spiritual are happier, in part because of what you described, having sort of this faith, having more meaning. They report having more meaning in life. They're in terms of handling adversity, also having stronger communities. Now us, secular people can also have those things, except we don't have a structure for it. So I can actually, that's a whole other conversation maybe we could have later. Thank you. You're next, and then you're at the bottom. Yeah, you're next.
Hi,
What's your name? What's your name?
Tasia.
Yeah, great.
Okay, my question's about the sustainable happiness model.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about specific intentional activities you can do in the first activity fit. I know the original model, I think you had like 50% genetics, 10% circumstances, and up to 40% intentional activities, and then that was revisited, say maybe 40% is too much.
Yeah.
What's a current estimation? What would you put?
So funny. So that model, let's see, we wrote that in 2004, so it was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And we changed our minds, and I'm like, and people are like, people get upset that not you, but just others. I'm like, 22 years is a long time. Like, we can change our minds. Is there anything you've changed your mind about? So we just regret putting numbers on it. So actually, I'm not actually necessarily saying that it's not those numbers. We just regret putting a hard number on it, because then people thought, they really took those numbers set in stone, and they're like, oh, it's 50%. And then for life circumstances, we were really talking about people who are in like normal, sort of comfortable, stable circumstances, not the person in the abusive relationship, not the person in, because I remember going to a talk, literally they were looking at people, I forget what country it was a country that was literally at war, and they said, look, for them it's not 10%. I'm like, oh, of course it's not. That's not, that's not what we meant. So I don't know what the numbers are. Again, I don't believe in putting a number on it. So I just now say that there's 3 buckets. I call them buckets. 3 buckets of influences on happiness. 3 buckets of contributors to happiness. One is genetics. Yeah, we know we actually kind of know the numbers a little bit better on those. 30 to 50% probably, right? 30 to 55. And then there's life circumstances, depending on where you are. If you're if you're in a comfortable position in life, it's probably not that high. because it's not going to make a huge difference for you to live in a different home or apartment, etc. And then in terms of the control, I don't know, but it's like one of the buckets is it's under your control. So I know we want that number, we want that number, but I can't give it to you. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. What's your name? Yeah.
John.
Okay. John.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Robert Sapolsky is a neuroscientist. He has a book called Determined.
Yeah.
Essentially argues,
Yeah.
and pardon my language, it's kind of a mind book,
Yeah.
where he's just like, there's no free will.
Yeah.
And so then, with all of this and the field's history and all of that, I guess my question, and kind of I guess answered a little bit, is how much of like a range in happiness is there, like from person to person? Like does each person, like you say, like wellness is this, is there then, well, not everyone can reach this level.
Right.
You can reach this level.
Right.
You can reach maybe this level.
Yeah.
But not everyone can be here. Is that something you've seen or
Yeah.
experienced?
So this is not okay. My answer, by the way, because the older I get, the more comfortable I am with answers that are not like strictly based on a particular study. I'm like, you know what? I have lots of now expertise that I can just draw on wisdom, life experience. I would say, first of all, that book, I haven't read it. I've read lots about it. And part of me is like, I kind of agree with him. It's very compelling, part of it, but yeah, if once you, anyway, I don't want to talk about free will. Not my area of expertise. I'm now actually reading the Michael Pollan book about consciousness, and now I'm like, plants aren't conscious. I'm like pretty convinced of that. Okay, totally digression. I think I really see it as like an effort problem, that if you don't have the resources, whether it's genetic or like circumstantial, it's just going to be a lot harder for you to reach that level. But I believe that almost everyone can, but it would take so much effort. And is it even worth it? And would you actually put that effort in? Because one of the resources we haven't talked about is the will and motivation and persistence to put that effort in, right? Because most people don't have that. So it's like, you remember all that, there's lots of written about the 10,000 hours. It actually has been a little bit debunked. But, let's just say there's some truth to the fact that putting in 10,000 hours and becoming expert, and what people don't talk about is like, what kind of person puts in 10,000 hours, right? Like that's a resource or a talent or a personality characteristic that most people don't have. So that some people just won't have that will to do it. But theoretically they could if they did, but they can't. So yeah, a great question. I mean, we could talk about that for hours, yeah. Okay, yeah, you are next, thank you. What's your name? Robin.
So do you find that people expect you to be happy most of the time because you're doing this research? And if so, how do you handle that?
Sure. By the way, it's already past the time, right? So I just want to make sure we have time for...
Yeah, let's go for a couple more.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
we're loving it. So.
Oh, great. No, I just want to make sure, like, I don't...
I'm in flow.
You're in flow. Okay. No, people don't expect me to be happy. I do remember a long time ago thinking, like, wow, I could never get divorced because I'm a happiness expert. That's silly, right? But no, I don't feel that way. I'm trying to think. I mean, people do ask me a lot, like, what makes you happy? I mean, so many reporters, it's like the most common question, like, what do you do? And actually today, if maybe some of you saw it, an article came out in the Washington Post about what Sonja Lyubomirsky does to be happy. Well, they did, that was the interview, that was what it was about. So I don't feel any kind of pressure. But I'm also lucky that I happen to be a happy person. There's this theory that people study what they don't have. And I think there's some truth to that. But it's not true for me. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe two of you, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm curious on your perspective on eudaimonia and hedonic happiness.
Okay. Not to make this a very long answer, I think the distinction has been way overstated. So let's just say eudaimonia is like meaning and engagement, and hedonic is like, feeling happy. Like basically that's what I study, is hedonic well-being. They almost always go together. They almost always get right. it feels good to have meaning. It feels great to be engaged. People who have meaning and who are engaged are happier. They almost always go together. And yes, there's some exceptions, where you're like, have a lot of meaning. I mean, and ironically, the big exception that people use is Mother Teresa, right? She apparently was unhappy, but had a lot of meaning in her work. It turns out that she was clinically depressed. Like there's a book that came out that she was like very depressed. So it's biological. So yeah, anyway, that's my answer. That there is a distinction for sure, but they almost always are correlated. Yeah,
Hi, my name is AJ. Thank you so much for giving this talk. It was really, really great.
Yeah.
I'm actually really curious because I was listening to your 5 mindsets, and I know you have like some background, with some people that were in conflict and relationships, and you even had an example of the 2 people who broke up, right? Because they kind of saw this as like a diagnostic tool inadvertently, right? But I had the Gottman's 4 Horsemen come up like this because it feels like so much of what you've talked about feels like the antidote, right? Where we're talking about like stonewalling, right? You're talking about being open and accepting, right? Like there's so much of it here, and I was just curious if that came across.
Yeah. No, I love Gottman's work. So let's see, stonewalling, criticism, what is it? Defensiveness, contempt. Yeah, contempt was the worst one, right? Well, I think he argues, right? Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's interesting because we cite him. Like sort of we're talking about, what we're talking about, is kind of creating the conditions, I guess, to make it less likely, right? Like when you're really open and sharing, you're truly curious or listening. And in fact, one thing I often say, this is really hard to do, in the middle of an argument, right? Or maybe when the person is stonewalling or you're defensive or there's contempt, be curious. You know how hard that is? The other person is like defensive or they're yelling and you're like, wow, I'm really curious why you're doing that. I mean, in your head, like really being curious, And so I do feel like they're kind of a little bit like the antidote, But we didn't actually. It's a good question. We didn't actually like directly consider it and think how it, And it was really about feeling love, not necessarily about how to have a good relationship or how to resolve conflict, but it was about how to feel loved even when you are loved. So that our aim was a little bit different. Yeah. Thank you for making that connection.
Okay, so we have one last question for Sonja. I know she needs to take a break, and you pick.
Yeah. All right. No, he was so enthusiastic.
It's ongoing. We've met online.
Yes. Hello.
So I'm going to ask, you talked about this as sort of the piece of work you're most proud of because it's sort of brought everything together.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're not done yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious what current research or future fields of research you find most exciting in terms of this whole idea of finding things we can do to be happy and flourish.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, it's funny because I know. People have asked me like, "What's your next book about?" I'm like, I really feel like, because it's been 13 years since my last book. Myths of Happiness was 2013, and I wasn't like, some people just write a new book every year, and I'm like, no, it really like took a long time before I was like, this is it. I have been kicking around an idea that a few people have suggested to me. But this is like being recorded. This is like who's gonna hear this? Everyone. But I'll
be careful.
Oh yeah, be careful. But I'll just say it. I mean, I've been kicking around the idea of writing a memoir because I've had like many lives, and I'm not saying I've had more lives than other people. I'm also a happiness scientist, so like there's some journalists who've said like this would be a really but it would include insights from research. Because I've been rich and I've been poor and I've lived with violence and I've lived in a long marriage and monogamy, non-monogamy. I've had 4 kids. Some have had mental health, physical health problems. I've just sort of lived so many different kind of lives. And being a happiness scientist and looking through that lens might be interesting. So that's something I've been kicking around. But like by kicking around, I mean like I've had a thought about it for like 5 minutes, but not done anything more. So, but I don't know. But see, I think people were like, oh, I know what I'm doing next. Like, I actually think it's a bad sign. Like, I'm just open. I'm open-minded. Who knows, like, what's gonna come to me next? Like, I've been really interested in the idea of intuition. So my intuition has gotten a lot better as I've gotten older. And it's not magic, but like I'll meet someone and I can tell like I hate them or I love them. I'll meet a couple, it's so obvious to me the couple is gonna make it or they're not gonna make it. And again, and I feel like I'm 80% right. When I say I'm 80% right, I think I'm really more like 99% right. But like I'm so fascinated, and I know there's a whole field of study on intuition, so maybe I'll study intuition. I'll be like new to the game because I'm sure there's experts out there. And again, it's not magic, it's just like there's 100 data. You meet a person, there's like 1,000 data points hitting you when you meet a new person, right? How is it that we immediately see like, that person is insecure, that person is ambitious, that person wants to be liked by that other person, right? Isn't it obvious? Like for some of you, it's probably obvious, right? You go to like a professional, like a work meeting and it's so obvious what everyone's agenda is, right? It's just like you get it with age and experience. Anyway, so that's interesting to me. But who knows what's going to happen in like 5-10 years. So thank you for asking.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, isn't she wonderful?